number 32, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The committee is meeting today to begin its study of diversity of procurement. We have representatives from the Public Services and Procurement Canada with us today. The last 30 minutes of the meeting will be devoted to committee business. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain the consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants that that are here at this meeting that taking any screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. I'd like to welcome the witnesses here today and Ms. Royds again, who was with us on Monday, but good to see you again. And with that, we will each have 5 minutes for an opening statement. I understand, Mr. Mills, you will begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'd like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak to Public Services and Procurement Canada's commitment to diversity in procurement in my role as the Assistant Deputy Minister of Procurement. I'm joined today by my colleagues Molly Royds, PSPC's Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of Procurement, Levent Osmotley, Director General of our Strategic Policy Sector, and Clinton Lawrence-White, the Director General of Procurement Assistance Canada. Comme vous le savez, SPAC...
As you're aware, PSPC procures goods and services on behalf of federal departments and agencies. Those procurements range from office supplies to military ships and everything in between. The department buys approximately $24 billion worth of goods, services and construction each year from nearly 10,000 suppliers. It is part of PSPC's responsibility to use our purchasing power to support Canada's economic, environmental and social policy goals. That includes ensuring a wide diversity of suppliers from underrepresented groups that have historically faced systemic barriers to success.
A few minutes to explain our actions to attract a wider diversity of suppliers. Consultations with Indigenous peoples, Black and other racialized Canadians, women, 2S LGBTQI+, Canadians with disabilities, and other communities have been critical to their development. In January 2022, PSPC launched its Supplier Diversity Action Plan, which includes concrete steps to increase the participation of businesses from underrepresented groups in federal procurement. Recent pilot projects were critical in forming this action plan. For example, PSPC administered a Black business procurement pilot to expand procurement opportunities for Black entrepreneurs. A cornerstone of this Supplier Diversity Action Plan is our policy on social procurement. This policy has broadened the value or the definition of the value for money for federal contracts in order to foster greater economic and social opportunities for underrepresented groups. And it empowers our procurement specialists to pursue their objectives in their day-to-day work. This policy demonstrates our commitment to continue to promote federal procurement with underrepresented suppliers. En appliquant cette politique, nous montrons clairement.
By enacting this policy, we're making it clear that including more underrepresented groups among our suppliers is now a core objective of our procurement function. In order to support the department's efforts, a supplier diversity program is currently under development, which will outline concrete actions to support increased participation from underrepresented suppliers.
PSPC is also working towards addressing the inequalities that exist between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. In August 2021, the Minister of PSPC announced the implementation of mandatory requirement for federal departments and agencies to ensure that a minimum of 5% of the value of their contracts are being awarded to Indigenous businesses. PSPC is working in close collaboration with Indigenous partners and other government departments to develop tools and guidance to support the implementation of the 5% target across government. By increasing contracting opportunities, we're able to help generate economic prosperity in communities that are not traditionally shared in this country's economic wealth. Mr. Chair, PSPC is also modernizing its procurement practices by making procurement easier, faster, and more accessible for suppliers particularly those from underrepresented groups. As part of our modernizing efforts, a new electronic procurement solution was launched in 2021, and more recently, Canada Buys replaced Buy and Sell as the official source for tender and award notices for federal procurement. These innovative tools will give us access to better procurement data, which will further support our decision-making processes. Ce ne sont là que quelques exemples de la façon.
These are but some of the examples of how PSPC has been modernising the federal procurement processes and is working towards a world-class procurement system that drives value for money and simplifies its procurement process. In closing, Mr. Chair, PSPC is committed to moving forward on this very important work of modernising procurement and diversifying the federal government's supplier base to ensure that it better reflects the Canadian population. And while we have taken important steps, we recognise that more needs to be done. Thank you, and I'd be pleased to answer questions from committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And we'll now go into questions, and we will start with Mr. Macaulay for 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, thanks. Witnesses, thanks for joining us today. Over 4 years ago, this committee tabled a unanimous report called Modernizing Federal Procurement for Small and Medium Enterprises, Women-Owned, and Indigenous Businesses. 15 of the 40 recommendations were specifically toward Indigenous and women-led, women-owned. How many of those 15 recommendations, keeping in mind it was well over 4 years ago, have been implemented?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions. I believe we were making progress on the majority of those.
Okay, I didn't ask if you're making progress.
Yes.
How many of those 15 have we implemented?
I don't have
Keep
this.
in mind it was June of 2018.
Again, some of the items will take a longer period of time to fully implement. We are making progress on the majority of them. Be happy to get back amongst those which were able to be implemented in a short order. And
This may give you a sense of deja vu because I asked this identical question probably about 2 years ago in this committee, and we got back nothing, actually. We got word salad back. I would like concrete information on what you're getting back. The reason I'm going into this is because, again, it's been over 4 years that we presented very clear, straightforward information. One of it was on tracking of how much business is going to women-led, Indigenous. I look at GC Infobase, the most recent numbers for results, and it shows percentage of increase in participation to procurement processes by businesses owned by women, date to be determined. So here we are 4 years and 3 months after we recommended it, date to be determined. If you look for Indigenous, and this was right from Treasury Board, date to be determined. So I've got to ask, what is PSPC doing 4 years and 3 months after the fact that we're still looking at date to be determined?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is one where I don't want to get too detailed, but we are in the process of implementing a new electronic procurement system. Within the electronic procurement system.
Let me interrupt right there. 4 years and 3 months, and we still don't even have results. We don't even have a goal for these. So what's it taking? I look at GC Infobase, I see the amount of bodies, full-time equivalents at PSPC has grown, I think, over 1/3. So it's not a lack of resources. Is it a lack of will?
So, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to clarify. We are doing procurements with women-owned businesses. We are doing procurement with Indigenous-owned businesses. We're doing procurements with diverse businesses. As we implement a new electronic procurement system, we are taking efforts to make sure that we collect the information that going forward we'll be able to more accurately track in real time the volume of that. What I'm not able to report on right now because we're just still in the implementation to be completed by June 2023 of the electronic procurement system.
Why does it take so long to just simply track that? Again, 4 years and 3 months. If you're in the private service, private sector, and someone said, you've got 4 years and 2 months to get this done, you would have had it done. Why is it 4 years and 3 months later and we're still implementing? I look at your 2022-2023 departmental plans, percentage of participation in procurement processes by Indigenous suppliers. And of course, it goes back several years. 2018, not available. 2019, not available. 2020, not available. 2021, not available. 2022, 2023, 11%, but this target has been established in accordance with the following baseline data of a guess of what it was for previous. Like, you've got unlimited resources, it seems. Like, you've added thousands and thousands of bodies to PSPC. It's a priority. It was recommended by this committee. It's a priority from this government. Then mandate letters. Why does it take so long to get done? I'm being blunt here, I'm doubting the sincerity of PSPC's desire to actually get this done. If we're seeing 4 years and 3 months, and I think you're just now kicking off an action plan?
Again, Mr. Chair, the implementation of our systems are very complex. It's multi-year to do that. We do now have the systems in place. I would add another dimension is collecting information on the identity of business owners requires a careful analysis of privacy consideration, ensuring that we're safeguarding the collection of that personal, important, private information within our systems. We had to do the necessary work to make sure that we were collecting that information in a secure fashion that was respectful of legislation such as the Privacy Act, and that has taken time. I would also like to note that over that course of that period too, we were very taxed as an organization in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh. I would understand the tax part if you were a regular organization with X amount of bodies that hasn't changed. But your department has grown from 12,000 to over 17,000. I don't see how adding thousands upon thousands of bodies would leave you taxed on something that's a high priority from this committee, but also set out in the mandate letter by the minister herself. I'm dumbfounded that, again, I'm asking these questions and nothing seems to be getting done.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. We'll now go to Mr. Johari for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mills, for your opening remarks. In your opening, you talked about January 22nd, PSPC launched the Supplier Diversity Action Plan. Help us set the stage. You've talked about pilots, you've talked about some of the programs, but if we take a step back, can you explain to us where we were, for example, 3 years ago, and the dimensions of this diversity program and where we are today?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I might ask Levent to answer this one as kind of the policy responsibility, talk a bit about the policy context and where we've been over the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the journey began back in 2018, where we started a continual process of gathering more information and testing for improvement as it relates to supplier diversity. So this is one of the cornerstones of the Supplier Diversity Action Plan. And as you've indicated, since that time, we've taken significant steps in establishing the social procurement policy, and we are working towards establishing a social procurement program which will further allow us to implement the measures that we're looking with respect to leveraging procurement for the benefit of all Canadians and for increasing supplier diversity with the businesses with whom we do business. We're expecting to see progress as it relates to data collection, which is yet another element of this. And my colleague could also elaborate on some of the steps that we're taking with respect to outreach with underrepresented suppliers and the coaching services and other supports that are being provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zumulon. So I understand the programs. Naturally, when we have programs, there are different stages of executing that program. Can you talk about the measures that these programs have planned to have in place for us to be able to monitor our progress?
Certainly, yes. As we start unrolling or implementing the steps, we'll be looking at the impacts that we have with respect to the number of contracts that are awarded to underrepresented suppliers, both in terms of participation of these suppliers in the procurement process as bidding on them, as well as the number of contracts that will be awarded. As was indicated by Mr. Mills earlier, data collection is now underway. We've launched the supplier profile questionnaires in the EPS system, and Canada Buys is now up and running. And as we start collecting more data on the businesses with whom we do these transactions, we'll be in a better position to understand more fully what do their profiles look like, and from there establish baselines that we can further analyze.
So thank you. If I echo back to make sure that I understand. So we have programs, we've rolled out programs, and you talked about the different programs. You've indicated that there are measures in place. Do we have targets for their measures for a specific period of time that we could get as part of the regular reporting? If we say we are trying to, for example, achieve 5%, and you talked about benchmarking, do we have, as example, for Indigenous, that we are at 2%? These are the concrete steps, and we are planning to achieve 4% by this time, 5% by this time. Is there such measures and such targets available?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. As it relates to Indigenous procurement, that's one where we can talk about some concrete targets. The 5% mandate, as you may be aware, was announced by the government, and we are implementing that as we speak in a phased approach, where we will have departments essentially meeting those targets in a 3-year time period. We have the first phase, which is ending at the end of this fiscal year, and within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year, we will have indicators as to what percentage of the business was actually awarded to Indigenous firms, and that includes contracts that were directly awarded to Indigenous suppliers, as well as subcontracts, because as you know, the ecosystem is quite important as it relates to procurement.
So we have programs. It looks like we have measures and we have targets. You're very specific about Indigenous, which that's an area. Do we have similar ones for other groups that we are trying to make sure that they're represented?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So as alluded to earlier, for the other groups that we are talking about, we are in the process of establishing those baselines by collecting information about the companies with whom we do business, so that we can get a better appreciation of the makeup of the businesses and what their profiles look like. And I would also add that this is a multidimensional exercise. We will be asking them questions about, which groups that they fall into, and in many cases they actually fit into more than one group. So that's also another interesting aspect of this exercise.
You opened up the concept of data and data gathering, because naturally one aspect of it is setting a baseline, but also having the data elements that's needed to be able to monitor and track it. Can you make a comment on what steps are you doing to make sure that not only we have the data, we have the targets, we have the years, and we have the measures and KPIs?
I'll proceed? Okay.
Dave, I'll give you 15 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. This, again, goes back to our e-procurement solution, where we'll be monitoring that type of data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We'll now go to Mrs. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. And thank you, gentlemen, for being in attendance today, and thank you for working to ensure that procurement is more accessible for everyone. That's important to me. It's important for hundreds of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses, particularly. This is always a sensitive, delicate issue. Now, I'm a history teacher by training, and historians' greatest fear is that the past repeat itself, because sometimes hell is paved with good intentions, and we repeat history without intentionally wanting to do so. So, obviously, I'm trying to make what I say hard-hitting. We need to ensure that everyone has the same access to contracts. That's absolutely crucial. And what I'm wondering is whether we need to invade people's private lives in order to achieve this? Or is there a way of proceeding anonymously? I honestly don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here with you. But to ensure that discrimination and segregation no longer occurs, no longer affects anyone, despite this good intention of wanting to reach everyone. It's almost as if all these individual groups and categories are in silos, hermetic silos, and I don't want to see that segregation continue. I don't want history to repeat itself. Obviously, Canada is not the United States. Canada, Quebec have their past, and it's not a pleasant past in many respects, and I don't want to see history repeat itself. Now, the reason I say all of this is that I read that there were LGBTQ business people who didn't dare, who didn't want to say that they belonged to that particular group. Now, if they're reluctant to say that out loud, are those contractors going to be knocked back because they're going to be swallowed up in the majority and considered to be part of the majority? So by attempting to achieve equality and equal access, are we not in the same breath segregating? What do you think?
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. And first, can I just apologize for not being there in person with my colleagues? Unfortunately, I'm recovering from a cold, so an in-person attendance wasn't possible today. In terms of the question, I very much appreciate the concerns that have been raised, and certainly those are things that we have been focused on as we've been developing the supplier diversity program, and specifically we have been engaging in consultations with the different underrepresented communities in relation to their concerns and the things that would be a priority for them to see in our program. And in fact, I've heard the same concerns that the member has indicated here as well. So certainly it is our intention with the program to, as was indicated in the opening remarks, it is our intent to create opportunities for underrepresented groups to increase their participation, as well as increase socioeconomic benefits to those underrepresented communities, and quite frankly to remove or lighten barriers in procurement, which we are aware that exists. And we've discussed a little bit as well the social procurement policy and the importance of...
I'm sorry to cut you off. Ms. Royds. We all agree when it comes to the objectives. Honestly, the objectives are praiseworthy, they're laudable, I support them fully. My question is, how do we ensure that in an effort to meet those objectives, that we don't inadvertently cause further segregation? In other words, how do we guarantee that we are not actually putting in place a system that is going to reproduce exactly what we're trying to avoid have occur? We all understand the objectives. We're all on the same page. How do we avoid further segregation by going after very sensitive data and saying, well, this contract is accessible to women, this contract is accessible to the black community? But if we make contracts accessible to some and not others, it ends up at the end of the day being segregation. How do we ensure that nobody is segregated, that everyone feels just so free, so included, that they are going to apply regardless because they know they're going to be seen, read, and fully considered?
Thank you very much for the question. And, I think that it's important, again, to highlight the extensive engagement that we have undertaken with the underrepresented communities and many of the issues that they have flagged to us in terms of the barriers to access to procurement opportunities. So our focus is very much on ensuring that we do remove those barriers and encourage the participation of underrepresented groups in the procurement processes. We definitely intend to do that, being conscious of some of the potential unintended consequences. We want to ensure that these benefits do go to the communities that we are targeting, but we also want to ensure that we are abiding by the policies, laws, and trade agreements and regulations that govern our procurement processes. So we are still finalizing the details of the supplier diversity program, and in line with the action plan that we released in January, it is our intention to be releasing the program in winter of this year.
Thank you, Ms. Royds. We'll now go to Mr. Johns for 6 minutes.
Thank you. There was a Globe and Mail article that was published today about the ballooning costs of the ArriveCan app, describing a lack of transparency with respect to subcontractors. And a company that has been awarded millions of dollars in federal contracts for work on the app seems to rely almost exclusively on subcontractors. Maybe someone can explain, how do the government's supplier diversity action plan and policy on social procurement apply to subcontractors? Mr. Mills, maybe?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good question. On this, with respect to the ArriveCan, I just want to make a distinction between subcontracting to companies and subcontracting to employees. In this case, my understanding is that there's a distinction that the firm in question was subcontracting employees to do the work. And so in terms of that piece, we, from a contracting perspective, we do look and we are working on systems to actually capture the value of subcontracts to companies, but not necessarily subcontracted resources that are, for purposes of contracted, treated as employees.
Okay, according to the article, there was several companies that were subcontracted to. So anyways, I guess where I'm going is, where are you going in terms of ensuring that those subcontractors or those employees are meeting the requirements?
So certainly we are looking at having the ability to make sure that we're capturing subcontracts, and that when we're doing large contracts that will necessarily involve subcontracting, that we are creating positive incentives for them to kind of follow some of what our actions are to make more opportunities available for diverse businesses, to make sure that they're not reimposing barriers that we've tried to remove through our normal contracting process, so that overall that the large contracts will also have greater representation of diverse suppliers within them.
Well, to me, it seems like there's lots of ways to circumnavigate the whole process. That's my concern. Now, there was a press release from the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business back in October 2019. They stated, quote, Aboriginal businesses could supply 24% of the federal supply chain, end quote. And we've heard Caroline Hilton from Indigenomics, obviously her talking about the impact that would have on Indigenous people, the potential and opportunity. Now, with that in mind, what challenges exist for departments and agencies in meeting a 5% Indigenous procurement requirement? And when does the government expect to meet that target?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. As my colleague indicated, as we're rolling out the new initiatives to meet the 5% target, it's a 3-year time frame that we're looking to meet overall for the government to meet that target. Some of the barriers that we would have to meeting that target would be around the nature of commodities and services and the location of commodities and services. So as an example, in the National Capital Region, we own a significant real property base that requires significant Indigenous labor force in this region to be able to meet those kind of targets. And the population, like the Indigenous population currently, is relatively small given the size of Ottawa relative to, say, a city like Winnipeg. So that is a challenge. It's one, as a department, we've been working with stakeholders, local communities, to think about how can we bridge some of these gaps.
Okay, that's great. And so what do you do when it comes to populations like Nunavut, where 80% or greater are Inuit, and the procurement policy is 5%. Are you, readjusting to meet the local Indigenous population? Because that 5% would actually mean they're getting far less than they should in terms of procurement.
So, and again, this is one, thank Mr. Chair for the question. We are working on the north to figure out how do we ensure that we are first and foremost respecting our comprehensive claims and land claim agreements. So in the case of Nunavut, the Nunavut agreement would have much higher requirements for procurement with Nunavut beneficiaries than the 5%, and we will continue to work to respect that.
What are the feedback mechanisms that exist for businesses, especially Indigenous businesses that bid but aren't successful in obtaining a federal government contract?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We do have Clinton Lawrence White with us from Procurement Assistance Canada, because one of the things that we really do focus on is making that a vehicle first for business to understand why they may not have been successful. Do we have coaching pilots and other mechanisms to really address the specific issues that prevented them from maybe being qualified and maybe winning, and looking at how they can develop kind of their competencies to be better positioned for those next set of opportunities.
Listening to them in terms of, is there a way for businesses that are owned or operated by equity-deserving groups and Indigenous groups to share their thoughts with the department or PSPC on the process and maybe identify any barriers that they might have experienced?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. So as we mentioned, through the development of our socioeconomic policy and continued work in the program, we have been engaging Indigenous businesses. Procurement Assistance Canada does have a lot of outreach and engagement with businesses level. We also work with Treasury Board as well as Indigenous Services Canada with an Indigenous reference group of representative organizations such as the Council for the Advancement of Native Development Officers, the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association, to understand their needs, to get their feedback, and to try and make sure that our programming is really aligned with the excellence and the capabilities within the Indigenous business community so that we can increase their involvement in our procurements.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And we'll go now to a second round, and we'll go to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Looking at the departmental plan for PSPC, I noticed page 13, it states target at least 5% of value of contracts awarded to businesses led and managed by Indigenous. Previous years, it was businesses owned. Why the change? And this question has come up in the past in this committee of like, how do we determine what's best for the community? Indigenous owned, but 50 non-Indigenous workers, or non-Indigenous owned and 50, Indigenous workers. How are we working out what's best for the community, and why the change?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. This is one where I would say it has been moving with the input of the Indigenous Reference Group and Indigenous business communities. Okay. Previously,
will it be same for women-led and black-led?
Yes, so the context of the change is there was a concern that there may be individuals that would own a business that would be 51%, but have nothing to do with it. So with the leadership owned and led is to make sure that those values and that the likelihood of benefits, as well as over time and across the population of businesses, a stronger likelihood that a greater level of secondary and tertiary benefits will accrue to those communities as the businesses.
This is specific. You mentioned owned and led. This is specific managed and led as opposed to owned.
No, there's ownership is a requirement for us.
Okay. It states differently in the departmental plans. Is that just oversight?
That may be an oversight in terms of language, but in terms of the policy, it's 51% owned and led.
Okay. You talked about difficulty with privacy laws. Can you provide to this committee in writing what those concerns are and what the specific laws are? Because we have tracked such businesses before. I don't think it's a new issue. I don't want to get into it now, but can you provide to the committee the exact laws that you're talking about that have been a barrier to achieving the recommendations set out in our previous study?
Yes, we'll follow up on that. And Mr. Chair, I would just like to respond with a quick one. So kind of to the point of the question before, particularly for the LGBTQ plus community, there's serious concerns about revealing their identity,
Yeah.
who would
I'm
have
talking
access.
specifically about the ones that are actually identified in our 2018 study with the recommendations, which was women-led and Indigenous-led. It sounded like that was the reason why we weren't able to identify Indigenous-led businesses for tracking.
So, and Mr. Chair, again, those are part of the groups covered by our policy. So as we're doing the overall policy, we're not segregating group by group.
Okay, would you just provide us with
We'll put it in writing.
more precise? Getting back to the original study, would you be able actually, when you do inform the committee on our recommendations from 2018, which ones have actually been accomplished and which ones halfway through, almost done, but also a date that the other ones will be achieved by, or if there's no intention of following that specific recommendation? Just want to walk through some of we talked about barriers, and I know from the previous study and other studies we've done here, the difficulty in filling out the procurement forms. Sometimes you need 1 to 2, 5 full-time people just to fill out an RFP to sell a single pen. What other barriers are you seeing for Indigenous businesses in being able to procure from the government?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, for the question. One of the key barriers that we've heard repeatedly is requirements for bonding. So businesses that are located on reserve have a barrier in law to pledging their property to access capital to bond.
Let me interrupt. That was an actual issue that came up for all SMEs. It wasn't just Indigenous. Will PSBC be addressing it for everyone? Because this was the issue we heard of, unlimited liability to sell the government a roll of toilet paper. It was frankly asinine. It only exists, I'm sure, within Canadian procurement. But will you address it for Indigenous and also other Canadian small SMEs?
So, again, Mr. Chair, with respect to Indigenous businesses, it is a unique problem that exists in the Indian Act and the inability to pledge on reserve assets to secure bonds. That's the issue that we're looking to address.
When will we be able to get by that? Does it require legislation on PSBC's part? Is it a GI order in council? Like, how easy is this to address?
Mr. Chair, I would say that addressing the legal impediment within the Indian Act to pledge on reserve assets to secure bonds is
I
very
meant PSBC rules, not Indian Act rules, but PSBC rules. You could waive that.
Again, Mr. Chair, we're working with Indigenous Service Canada, who's a lead in terms of the programming on potential solutions, workarounds to address this problem in partnership with Indigenous organizations such as the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. We'll now go to Mrs. Thompson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope I'm going to pronounce your name correctly, Mr. Osmotlu. Thank you so much. Do you find that there are differences across regions in Canada with a diversity in procurement? And then what is it that you can do to improve the diversity in procurement programs?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Given the demographic differences across the country, yes, of course, we can expect to see differences in terms of representation in different procurement opportunities. The demographics in a place like Toronto obviously will be vastly different than a rural community. But what I can say is we're trying to design our programs in such a way that, when they are procurements for the Government of Canada, they are obviously open for bids. Regardless of where the suppliers are located. There may be certain instances where geographic proximity to where the requirement is unfolding may be required or may be a bit of an advantage. But certainly our approach is to look at it in a pan-Canadian basis to ensure that we're not leaving any region behind or any group in a region behind. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I will follow up with just sort of another nudge in specifics or a little more detail in terms of that pan-Canadian strategy. What does that look like in terms of really assisting more underrepresented groups in terms of really expanding diversity, what it looks like to really assist in the process of the procurement process, which I'm sure can be quite daunting.
Thank you again for the question. Maybe I'll start off, and then I could turn to my colleague Clinton Lawrence-White, who can elaborate a little bit more from the perspective of Procurement Assistance Canada. But what I was alluding to is that, when we have procurement opportunities, they are not limited to any particular region, typically. So even if, for example, there's a requirement for a goods procurement in the National Capital Region, you don't have to be in the National Capital Region to fulfill that requirement. So with that view, we are looking at representation across the country. And maybe I'll turn it over to my colleague Clinton, who can elaborate a little bit more about the services that they provide in different offices across Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. We've talked about my organization. It's Procurement Assistance Canada. Has the mandate to aid small and medium business to participate in federal procurement and to support the efforts to increase supplier diversity in the federal base. As mentioned, recognizing that there is the diversity across the country, Procurement Assistance Canada has a network of 6 regional offices that we are able to leverage to work closely with community partners to help them secure the support that they need. We also established partnerships with key players in the regions, and we're able to put in place different types of supports, including educational supports. We provide direct assistance. We do webinars. It's all with the goal to helping these different communities be more comfortable in their ability to actively participate in federal procurement. Our intent is to, at the end of the day, have these different businesses to be bid ready so that they can confidently look to participate in federal procurement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Ms. Royds, on the same along the same thread, could you speak about the methods criteria in place to verify whether a business meets the diversity procurement criteria?
Yeah, Mr. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Clinton. Did you want to take this one?
No, that's okay.
Okay. So thank you very much for the question. And in terms of ensuring that we are targeting the right underrepresented groups, that we have there's various means of certification. So one being self-certification. Another would be some increased form of validation, and the third would be having a third party certify the underrepresented suppliers. As part of the Supplier Diversity Action Plan, we're currently evaluating our options in relation to that, and that will form part of the program as we move forward. A big key component of this, obviously, for us is increasing our understanding of our supplier base. And my colleagues already spoke to the e-procurement system that we have launched and Canada Buys. And one of the pieces of that is a supplier questionnaire, which has disaggregated data in the way that we are asking for suppliers to identify, which will allow us to work in partnership with StatsCan to ensure that we have a good understanding of our supplier base. And that goes to the question as well about understanding it from a regional as well as from a specific underrepresented supplier group, pardon me. And then the final point that I would raise would be just in relation to the Indigenous, the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses that our colleagues at Indigenous Services Canada have leadership of. The criteria there is to be registered in the Indigenous Business Directory. So that particular one has a specific process that is in place to support that policy. And I don't know if any of my colleagues
thank you very much.
Want to add.
Thank you, Ms. Royds. Now we'll go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Ms. Royds, earlier you talked about the obstacles that SMEs and underrepresented suppliers face. Now, if I take 2 SMEs here by way of example, one is from an underrepresented group Another is from an overrepresented group. Both have otherwise the same characteristics. They apply for the same contract. They have the same number of employees. That kind of situation or scenario may arrive and does. What obstacles does the underrepresented group face that the overrepresented group will not face? Very quickly, if you would.
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. So as indicated, we are aware of the barriers that are faced by underrepresented suppliers in procurement, and we have engaged in extensive consultations with the groups. And some of the things that we have heard are around an awareness of our procurement opportunities. So that's one of the important pieces of having Canada Buys and its capabilities.
I'm sorry once again to cut you off. Small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, they sometimes have difficulty understanding the pith and substance of contracts. How are those obstacles present for underrepresented groups more so than for overrepresented groups? Just let's stick to that particular example. So how is it, in light of what you're telling me, underrepresented groups may be disadvantaged compared to overrepresented groups? How is it that there would be the obstacle in the case of one group but not for the other, whereas it should be applicable in both cases? How does that become a criteria that's factored in? And if it is applied, why isn't it only applying to one particular group, i.e. underrepresented?
Thank you for the question. And so in particular, in relation to underrepresented groups, again, we have various, and my colleague Clinton is at the table, can speak a bit more to the Procurement Assistance Canada supports that are available to support those that do not have the same experience or success in our procurement processes. So some of this, again, is about the awareness of opportunities. It also relates to the complexity of our processes. And again, we have, complex statements of work and requests for proposal that we do put out into the market, and the companies that are more familiar and broadly represented within the procurement process, as was already discussed, many have bid writing units as part of those companies, and a lot are familiar.
Je m'excuse, mais une compagnie.
I'm sorry, but an SME is not a company. An SME of 5 individuals is an SME of 5 individuals, regardless of who heads it up. And they have to face the same obstacles. What obstacles do they face? Please send your response in writing.
And I would, likewise, Mr. Lawrence White, if there's something further you could add to that answer, if you would submit that to the clerk, I'd be appreciated. Thank you. Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I'd like to hear which departments are actually furthest ahead in achieving diversity objectives in their procurement, especially in Indigenous procurement, and if there are any lessons that can be applied to departments that are lagging. Maybe Mr. Mills?
With the question, I think we're waiting for kind of the end of this reporting cycle to have kind of clarity on who is the best, but we can, from, I would say, more anecdotal note that recently Health Canada has had very strong results in terms of their Indigenous procurement. I believe what I heard was they're in the teens in terms of their percentage of procurement that's gone to Indigenous businesses. In some of their code procurements, was involved and do know that they took a strategy to try and ensure that if there were Indigenous suppliers that they were included, and that helped contribute to it. And we have kind of engaged with Indigenous Services Canada to bring their chief financial officer, who's responsible for procurement for that department, to a committee of multiple departments to explain what they've been doing, what their strategies have been in order to achieve those results and kind of try to replicate them in other departments.
Yeah, it'd be good to see, learn where it's working, where it isn't working, and what you're going to do about where it isn't working. The 2020-21 annual report by the procurement ombudsman listed the top issue of federal procurement identified by stakeholders was evaluation criteria that were, quote, unfair, overly restricted, or biased, end quote. Stakeholders were concerned in these instances that only one bidder would be able to meet the criteria. And another top 10 issue identified was timelines that were so tight that only an incumbent contractor would be able to meet them. Can you talk about what steps PSPC is taking in response to these issues and to level the playing field so new entrants, especially Indigenous entrants, have a better chance of success?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In terms of the evaluation criteria and the actual requirements, those are elements of the procurement package that are developed through the departments. The departments define what their needs are. They define what they're putting priorities on in terms of the selection. So one of the things that we realize, having identified this, is that we need to do a higher level of kind of due diligence with that lens of saying, like, how fair are those, what could be potentially some of the pitfalls, and provide some more kind of guidance to departments on that. More generally, through contract simplification and kind of simplification of procurement documentation, we are looking to try and even simplify the process, so to reduce the amount of paper or kind of work that is required on firms in terms of responding to bids, and to try and make sure that those, both the evaluation criteria, but what they're demanding is reasonable and kind of approachable from a wider range of businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. We'll now go to Mr. Lobb for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, and thanks for being in person, for your appearance here today. Good to see. First question is, in the last 4 years, let's just say, I don't know how closely you track it, what is your estimate that for Indigenous businesses that you've done business with Indigenous? Do you have a number?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Internally to PSPC, we have been around 5%. It varies from year to year in terms of what we procured on behalf of ourselves. Overall, for the government as a whole, it's a little bit less. I'd have to get back to you on a precise number. And again, part of that is our procurements, depending when we're serving the overall government, use a number of different systems, and some of those systems do not have the markers for the contract, whether it's with an Indigenous business. So we actually have to do kind of post-calculation to identify which of the businesses we've done contracting with are indeed Indigenous.
Okay, well, that brings up an interesting question that I was thinking about as well, because I know the Canada Buy system, it looks like it's an SAP platform.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure most of the government stuff is Microsoft, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong with that. So how many different systems have to communicate with one another for you to actually get your 5% target? How many different software systems are there?
Thank you for the question. Right now, we would probably be about a half a dozen different systems, but with the full implementation of the electronic procurement solution, we will be moving to one system. One of the things we are doing in parallel is looking at kind of our data analytics as a whole, and being able to remove the data from these systems and put them in a warehouse, and then use one data analytic tool to be able to analyze all of the data coming from the different systems.
Yeah, okay. Have you been able to identify how many Indigenous businesses there's out there that you could actually contract with?
Thank you for the question.
Because, I mean, the goal is 5%. Is it even possible? If it isn't possible, how many years do you project it would take to actually be possible?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Again, when we've talked to kind of the business representative communities for the Indigenous businesses, such as the National Aboriginal Capital Corporation, Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, as well as Council for Advancement of Native Development Officers, they've indicated that that 5% should be a floor, and that there is much more potential out there in the Indigenous business community to supply more than 5%.
Are there particular, because, you go through the Canada Buy, some of these contracts are very specific and very technical and very detailed, and, you just can't walk in off the street and do these. So Is there specific areas that you have identified that would be ones that would be more readily available to the workforce?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. Internally, I'd say we'd look at two of the largest categories being in the area of construction, so subcontracting to construction, as well as in the information technologies, both from supplying technologies, hardware, as well as software, as well as even consulting within the IT domain. And beyond that, we do a number of contracts for goods where the goods are not manufactured in Canada. They're actually companies that get the rights to distribute and supply certain goods. Those are other areas where we've seen strong potential for Indigenous suppliers to be able to enter and provide goods. So, for example, during the pandemic, in order to administer the mRNA vaccines, we needed to use low dead volume syringes, which were a new item, very hard to get. And one of our key contracts was actually with an Indigenous supplier who's able to get a supply of those from overseas and make them available for Canadians.
Okay. Any more time there, Mr. Chair? Must be pretty well 5 minutes, eh?
Yes.
Okay. There.
Thank you. Yes.
Not
We
talking
will
out
now go to Mr. Kazmierczak for 5 minutes, or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Mills, you mentioned in your remarks the importance of disability inclusion and in some of your answers. And can you speak a little bit to how we are doing in terms of procurement from businesses that are owned by Canadians with disabilities? How are we doing? And are there, in terms of the challenges, are there similar challenges that we're seeing with other underrepresented groups? Are there different challenges that we have to focus on in terms of, again, procuring from businesses owned by Canadians with disabilities?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I would have to say, as it comes to businesses owned with persons with disabilities, this is actually a challenge, I would say, economy-wide for Canada. When we look at the general number of businesses owned by persons with disabilities, it's very low relative to the percentage of the population. So there's more work to be done with our partners at Industry, Science and Economic Development, as well as the regional development agencies, to look at how we might be able to increase the overall kind of community of businesses owned by persons with disabilities in Canada, and then make procurement. From the procurement perspective, there are real challenges, certainly with respect to, as we move to an electronic procurement solution, one of the things we're very concerned about is the accessibility of those technologies and what may be the kind of barriers that we could unintendedly create. So that's one area we're very focused on, and we're trying to set a high bar in terms of accessibility standards for our web presence and whatnot, as well as look at how do we make available other kinds of sources of kind of interaction with businesses owned by persons with disabilities if need be, because that technology does happen. I would actually ask Levent to talk also a bit. We are concerned to this enough, and we haven't put as much discussion in today about what we're doing specifically on the accessibility internally from an organizational perspective to try and address these.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So as indicated, persons with disabilities face two challenges. One is they're underrepresented generally in the procurement space, and two, they have accessibility issues that we have to be mindful of. So this includes having access to procurement opportunities, as well as being able to access the procurement materials that are being provided. So the systems are very important, but we also have to look at this from the perspective of contract simplification in order to make our processes less cumbersome and the documents shorter, so that even with the great technology that we do have available today, we have to kind of reduce those barriers even further.
It's heartening to hear that this is a focus and a priority within PSPC. You mentioned the need to grow the pool of entrepreneurs across these underrepresented groups. Our federal government has a $6 billion women entrepreneurship strategy. We have a $250 million Black Entrepreneurship Fund. Is PSPC actively working with some of the ministries that have developed and are rolling out these programs to see how PSPC can leverage and be partners on these programs?
Thank you for the question. Yes, one of the key areas as we try to develop the program is to look at where there's areas of representation and how those map onto the types of goods and services that we buy, and where there's not, really have that more focused discussion with our partners about how do we grow businesses in those areas where we buy commodities, where buying goods and services may actually be catalytic in growing out those business opportunities. So that's definitely something we're trying to work with in terms of having greater understanding of the overall market environment, how our buying maps to the overall market, and where we can leverage, again, this to actually help grow the Canadian market and creating business.
Excellent. And one last question is, the U.S. utilizes set-asides quite effectively. Can you tell us what is a set-aside and how would it work to help us increase diversity in procurement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. So generally speaking, a set-aside would be a procurement where you would limit the eligible participants to a defined group. So if you were to say an Indigenous business, you might say, in order to enter and submit a bid and have an eligible bid in this process, you need to be a business that is registered with Indigenous Services Canada's Indigenous Business Directory, and they would be the only eligible participants in that process.
Do you have an example of a successful process like that? Either right, and I don't want to put you on the spot. You could put it in writing, but I'd love to hear about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should have had one. I don't have one on hand, but I will say that within our comprehensive claims agreement and under the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, where procurements are for the benefit of an Indigenous community, there are many examples of set-asides where they've set aside that opportunity only for Indigenous businesses. We can work with Indigenous Service Canada to provide some opportunities for you.
Thank you. And thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kuzmierczuk, and I recognize that one doesn't necessarily mean one last question. We'll now go to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to ask a couple of quick questions. You mentioned, I think it's with PSPC, you figure about 5% is going to Indigenous right now. How are you tracking that if we've got all these privacy issues and this and that? How are you coming up with 5%?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Since probably the late 1990s, we've had the procurement strategy for Aboriginal businesses, but now the procurement strategy for Indigenous business. So under those programs, we did take efforts to actually have businesses identified as Indigenous within our supplier registration, and we've been keeping that data for a number of years. I don't know, Levent, if you have time of when we implemented it.
Yeah, it was in the late 90s, and I believe the data started.
But if it's a privacy issue that you can't track it, how are you tracking it that you can claim it's 5%? You told me earlier that you couldn't fulfill one of our recommendations because of privacy laws and this and that, but somehow you are tracking it.
Mr. Chair, the privacy issues when we look at the privacy issue, we have to look at it from a number of lenses, one of which is businesses voluntarily registering in a system with an acknowledgement of what their data would be used for and agreeing to submitting their data versus holding data within a system that we're building and having new systems versus the questions and the information that we might ask when we run a procurement process and hold that data. So okay. In terms of the Indigenous out there.
One last quick question. I just want to get back to the bond issue. About 40%, give or take, of Indigenous live on reserve, so 60% are off. How much of this bond issue is an issue with the 60% that are not living on reserve, that we're not saying to put up unlimited liability to land they can't legally do so? And how easy is it just to remove that bond issue altogether as a procurement process? Because again, we heard it from the other small, medium enterprises, women-led other, mainstream companies, that the need to offer up unlimited liability bond for a small contract was impossible. How easy is it just to get rid of that bond requirement and instantly help Indigenous businesses?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. As to the first one, you're correct. For businesses that are not owned by First Nations, that are not on reserve, that is not a legal impediment to them, as long as they have assets off reserve.
Right. But I've also asked the 60% who are off reserve, but how difficult is it just for PSPC to get rid of that bond issue?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we are actually running a pilot right now for a smaller construction procurement where we did not require this. It is actually a Treasury Board policy for us to have security. So there would be policy change that would need to be done to make it more permanent. I would also note that there are other stakeholders who have an interest in this. The Canadian Construction Association, for one, has noted reasons that they prefer to have or continue with certain securities with respect to subcontractors.
To keep out the competitors, yes. I'm sure they would love to.
So there's some
something
industry
that is very easy to do with an ordinary council, perhaps with Treasury Board or someone that we could help out. A lot of small, medium enterprises, Indigenous, Black-owned and everything, that certainly would help them without hurting Canadians and the Crown, I assume that.
Thanks,
Overly general, but is that fair to say?
I can speak to Treasury Board in terms of how easy it will be to change that policy. We would have to work with them.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. We'll now go to Mr. Baines for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests for joining us today. I'm curious about veterans. How do veteran-owned businesses factor into the department's current procurement diversity goals?
Chair, for the question. Maybe I could start off.
Have they been considered?
So I think, Mr. Chair, it's important to make a distinction here. You know, as we're referring to underrepresented suppliers, we are at this time talking about Indigenous suppliers, Black and racialized Canadians, other visible minorities, persons with disabilities, and the LGBTQ plus communities. Notwithstanding that, you may be aware that there are other opportunities for veteran employment as well. There is the long-standing RFR policy for the Corps of Commissionaires, as an example. And I would also add that our approach to designing a supplier diversity program is that it would be something that we can iterate on. So it's not to say that the groups that we've identified at this point will be the same groups that would be identified in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And amongst our bidders, does your department recommend certain types of businesses to adopt a diverse supplier program?
Thank you for the question. We are encouraging diversity within the supply chain to the greatest extent possible. I would also note that there is the federal program for employment equity, which is led by the Minister of Labor. That is a program whereby any company that receives a contract worth $1 million or more and has 100 or more employees in Canada has to sign up to employment equity provisions. And we do ensure that the contracts that we award to such companies are vetted against that list prior to award. And if they're not there, then they do have to commit to meeting those obligations throughout the performance of their contracts.
Okay, thank you. And specifically to Mr. Osmutlu, how does Canada's diversity goals compare next to those of, say, other countries around the world?
Thank you for the question. We have been looking very closely at other countries, whether it's the United States or in Europe, and trying to learn some of the lessons from them. If you look at, for example, Australia, they do have a very developed model as it relates to Indigenous procurement and their certification process. Likewise, when we look at the United States, they've had a history of different set-aside programs. So we'd like to see, the results of some of what they have done in order so that we may, borrow, I guess, some of the strategies that are working for them. But we do have many of the same challenges, and to the extent that, again, we can take some lessons learned and make those work for our purposes, we are doing that.
Okay, and I believe one of my other questions was already answered. It was asked, I think, by my colleagues. So those are all the questions I have for today.
Mr. Baines. We'll now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. I'm sorry for my outburst earlier. I had asked twice in a row a comparison between SMEs and other SMEs, but in any event, Mr. Mills, among the underrepresented groups, are Francophones part of an overrepresented or underrepresented group? A very quick answer, please.
Question, Mr. Chair, within the current policy, they are not one of the groups, underrepresented groups, so they'd be in the...
Okay.
I see. So Francophones are not underrepresented in the awarding of contracts. Understood. Mr. Lawrence White, I understand that for SMEs, it's complicated to have access to buy and sell Canada. I have fun, well, that's saying a lot, but I do sometimes amuse myself by seeing how many contracts are coming in. Several hundred on average. It can be tough for an SME that only has a couple of employees, maybe a max of 30 or 40, that has to continue to check buy and sell. No, for a SME of 400 employees, how do you go about it? How could we make it more simple, more straightforward, easier to be familiar with contracts and to ensure that they're open to everyone? Gender, color of your skin, we want everyone to apply. How can we make it more simple? Should we use the chambers of commerce, the boards of trade? Not many people read newspapers anymore, but how can we make it more user-friendly?
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. For PSPC Canada, one of our priorities was to engage with businesses across all of Canada, and one of our priorities was to enhance their understanding of the way government works. An important element of that is having a measure of user-friendliness with the use of the tools. And tools like set websites are, of course, part and parcel of that. We work directly with businesses to help them use these tools. For example, set signals or reminders when certain procurements contracts become available, automatic reminders. We also work with people to help them research opportunities. For us, it's all about helping businesses, especially SMEs, so that they have a level of comfort in navigating the system. And we do this job throughout all of Canada.
Go to Mr. Johns for 2.5 minutes.
We talked a little bit earlier, Nunavut is a good example, 80% Inuit population. You said there's the Nunavut agreement. I live in Nuu-Chah-Nulth Territory, and from Taloquit area in the 5 Central Region nations of the west coast of the island. That area in particular is 50% Indigenous. Can you speak about how you're readjusting? You talked about in Ottawa, you've met the threshold, the goal, the target of 5%, which is great. What are you doing in areas where you're not hitting the target, you're below it? And how are you gauging, the 5%? You're looking at a nationwide goal, target, but there's areas for sure where you're falling far short. And you're not meeting close to the population. What are you going to do to adjust that?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. So one of the things that we're really trying to work with our broader client base of departments is to have a better forecasting of what their procurement opportunities are in the future for the next 2 to 3 years and see where those are geographically located. And from that, be able to kind of look at some of our strategies so that if they're buying goods or services in areas such as Nuu-Chah-Nulth Territory where there is greater capacity, that maybe we look at targeting more of our activity and maybe over procuring there because in other areas there wouldn't be the opportunity or the population of Indigenous businesses that could meet the opportunity. So we really want to look at how do we have a better understanding where the businesses are located and what their capacities are, and for opportunities where it makes sense, where they're going to be very locationally driven, to try and take advantage of those opportunities.
I guess the thought would be to work with the tribal councils, work with the individual nations to explain where they're at in terms of the threshold and target. In terms of a 2021 paper prepared for the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses, recommended that to introduce a new micro-contract policy for federal contracts of less than $10,000. These micro-contracts would be exclusive Indigenous set-asides, and we've written in plain language. Can you talk about the federal government introducing this type of micro-contract policy, and do you think it would reduce barriers of entry to Indigenous business? I certainly believe it would in the New Chalmette territory nations as well.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so one of the things that we are really looking for from a procurement modernization perspective is trying to figure out where we're overexpending effort internally and demanding from external to purchase. So looking at, smaller dollar value contracts where maybe we can use even more informal processes. So I know some of our colleagues have experimented with processes where businesses are invited in, they describe a challenge, and it's almost kind of like a speed dating exercise. The businesses would say, here's how we might meet that requirement, and then they can say, okay, the approach that you go meets our need, and then go and negotiate. So we're looking at those kinds of opportunities where the actual engagement procurement process would be much more scaled to the actual size of the opportunity and the nature of the business. That is something that we really want to look at more and more for our simplification.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. And with that, we've come to the end of our questions. And so I would like to thank the witnesses for being here today. Thank you for those in person, and Ms. Royds, and being with us again on virtually. So, and Ms. Royds, we hope that you're feeling better soon and able to come in person the next time. With that, Mr. Mills, thank you very much. Mr. Lawrence White, thank you very much. And Mr. Osmutal, did I pronounce that right? Osmutal, thank you very much. I apologize if I messed that up, but thank you all for there. And with that, I will dismiss the witnesses and thank you for being here. And I'm gonna. Yes, sorry, I'm gonna keep going. Yep. All right. Okay, thank you. So thank you very much, and we'll now move on to the committee business. And just so that the committee is, just to remind you, we are in public, just so that you're aware of that. So we have just a couple things I wanted to cover. The first is that Ms. Vignola has had her motion on the table. She has now presented another motion. And my understanding is there's been discussions amongst everybody that there's general agreement on accepting the motion as the new motion as she has presented it. Is that correct? Or sorry, we need you to move that first if that's the case.
Ouais. Donc,
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, well, today there's been further discussion. Initially, I made amendments based on what I was asked to do, and that was not going to be a problem. But given that I didn't get any definitive answers from everyone, I thought, well, this isn't going to be a problem. But today I got wind of new suggestions that I'll allow my colleagues to propose that we can discuss very quickly, if you would, regarding what would be submitted and when. We all agree that we want these documents. We want the documentation. It's more about dates and timeframes. Some colleagues want to discuss that.
Before we get there, Ms. Vignola, I need you to move the motion if we're going to discuss this motion. So you need to move.
faut que je la lise.
Oh, I have to read it out loud. I see. I've just got to find it first. Thank you. well, that's life, isn't it? So here's the motion, and it's in point form, so it's easier to read. That pursuant to Standing Order 108(2), the committee undertake a study on the expenses of the Office of the Governor-General's Secretary for its representation activities abroad and in Canada for the years 2015 to present, i.e. the last 2 years of Mr. Johnson, Ms. Payette and Mr. Simon. So, 1, that in light of the information disclosed since the meeting on Tuesday, September 22nd, concerning the testimony of representatives of organisations related to the decision-making process and the use of budgets by and for the Office of the Governor-General's Secretary, the committee invite the following witnesses to testify: Ms. Christine McIntyre, Deputy Secretary, Policy, Program and Protocol Branch, Office of the Governor-General's Secretary; Mr. Stuart Wheeler, Chief of Protocol of Canada, Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development; senior officials of the Department of Canadian Heritage; senior representatives of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police; and any other witnesses whom the committee deems appropriate to invite. 2, that testimonies take place over at least 3 meetings. The committee has its first meeting, the latest, on Monday, November 15, the other meetings being scheduled in accordance with the schedule prepared for the other studies taking place and in agreement with the chair and clerk. 3, the Department of National Defence, Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Department of Canadian Heritage and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police table the financial reports of the expenses incurred during the trips of the Governor-General from 2015 to present, broken down by trip and by item of expenditure, including, in particular, accommodation costs, catering costs, caterer costs, travel costs, security costs, and costs for alcohol and drinks, indicating the number of people included for each delegation. 4, that copies of invoices associated with the March 2022 trip to the Middle East of the Office of the Governor-General's Secretary be produced. That the said documents be submitted in English and French and forwarded no later than Monday, October 31st at noon to the clerk of the committee, and the clerk forward them upon receipt to members of the committee. 6, that the committee report its observations and recommendations to the House. So I'll just underline the mistakes and typos that I came across when I read aloud the motion.
Thank you. Ms. McNaughton, now the floor is open for debate. Any discussion? Mr. Housefather.
Okay. Try to put all of the different amendments that we discussed into the motion, but basically maybe I can give a synopsis of what we would propose beforehand, and then we could go with the discussion. And I'll read the amendment one by, well, there'll be one amendment, but I'll read it all together as I've drafted it. So basically, what we would propose is this be limited to foreign travel of the Governor General, not domestic travel. That what we would do is we would ask for production by October the 31st of number 4, the invoices associated with the trip to the Middle East, and we would add to number 4 a list of all of the foreign travel undertaken by the current Governor General and the 2 previous Governor Generals. And then when the committee receives that document of the travel taken by the current and former Governor Generals, we would select 2 years from each Governor General and ask that the travel be produced for those years once we see what travel took place in what years. So basically, instead of asking for all of the voyages since 2015, we would pick 2 years for each Governor General so that there would be a comparison. But the first thing would be to get a list of all the travel, the foreign travel taken by the Governor Generals in each year since David Johnston first became Governor General. Those documents, because that would be complex. That's not easy. Those documents that are set out in number 3 don't exist right now in a synthesized format that we know of anywhere. It would mean the Office of the Governor General would need to put it all together and compile it, so that those documents would only have to be produced in January before the House returned, before we had our last 2 meetings on the subject. So basically, October 31st would be the copies of the invoices with the March 22nd, 2022 trip, and it would be a list of all the foreign travel of each of the current and 2 previous Governor Generals. The committee would then decide what years we wanted production of all of the documents for, presumably 2 years per each Governor General, and then that would be due in January. So that's sort of what we discussed with Ms. Vignola, and in order for, Mr. Chair, for this to make sense, what I would suggest is I've gone through the paragraphs, read the amendment as they would suggest, and then we could have the discussion. So, sure, of course, Mr. Chair.
Once you're done that, we can have a copy
your mic.
of that. So that
Of course.
Yep. Okay.
Well, I mean, a copy right now. I would suggest I've only scatteredly wrote it right
Okay.
now, so I'm hoping that we can better produce it. So number 3 would now read at the beginning, for the years selected by the committee, that Department of National Defense, so nothing will change other than that. And then in the 3rd line, it would say, instead of trips, it would say foreign trips. And then instead of the Governor Generals from 2015 to present, it would say of the current Governor General and the previous 2 Governor Generals. And I'll just wait till you're clear on that, Mr. Clerk, and then I'll go to the next amendment. Number 4, okay. Would you like me to read it back as it would read completely, or?
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so in my view, it would be, for the years selected by the committee, that the Department of National Defense, Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Department of Canadian Heritage, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police table the financial reports of the expenses incurred during the foreign trips of the current Governor General and 2 previous Governor Generals, broken down by trip and by item of expenditure. Nothing else would change.
Right, the rest would be the same.
On number 4, it would say that it would say exactly as it says now, that copies of invoices associated with the March 2022 trip to the Middle East of the Office of the Governor's General Secretary be produced, as well as a list of all foreign trips undertaken by the current Governor General and the 2 previous Governor Generals.
This would be, again, the 2 previous Governor Generals?
Yeah, meaning Payette and Johnson. And then number 5, when you're ready, Mr. Clerk.
Number 5? Yeah.
Number 5, that the documents required under Article 4, or would it be Section 4 or Article 4?
Section 4?
Section 4. That the documents required under Section 4 be submitted. And then number 6 would be that the committee will determine the years for which the documents set out in number 3 will be produced, and that those documents be produced no later than January 25th, 2023.
May I ask you, I beg your pardon, Mr. Housefather, number 6, could you repeat that, please, so I make sure I've got it all down?
Sure. That the documents that the committee will determine the years of production for the documents required under Section 3, and that those documents shall be produced to the clerk of the committee no later than January 25th, 2023.
And Mr. Housefather, just point of clarification, would number 6 that's on the document now become number 7?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
And Ms. Thompson, my colleague Ms. Thompson, has mentioned to me, which is absolutely true, that in that at the beginning, if that is part of the resolution, the words "and in Canada" should be removed. So it should be for its representation activities abroad, and it should be for the years selected by the committee. In that, if that's part of the resolution, I'm not sure if it is.
I just need to know.
So
which
if you go to
section
the
you're
beginning,
referring
Mr. Clerk.
to. Beginning of which paragraph?
Like before number 1, there's a that, and I'm not sure if that's really part of the motion or not. The that, but if it is, then we'd need to remove the words "and in Canada."
And in Canada for the year. Oh, okay. Remove "and in Canada."
And then it would be for the years selected by the committee, not 2015 to the present, because the committee will select the years of the travel that it wishes to receive.
So it's replace "and in Canada" for the years 2015 to the present with for the years to
selected by the committee.
Selected by the committee. Thank you.
I know that's complex, and I should have had this all written down, but we just talked about it before the meeting, so I did my best.
You just hate us.
Hate you? No, not at all. I love all you guys.
Call for debate on the amendment.
So we have an amendment. Mr. McCauley.
Sorry. I tease you about this, but it does seem overcomplicated what you're asking for. A lot of this stuff we can get from an order paper, and the Post was able to get, their ATIP within like a month back. So I'm questioning why the desire to only say 2 years here, 2 years. We can do an order paper on the costs and the breakdown, liquor, food, security, travel, and get that back in 45 days. The other items is actually the actual paperwork, and if the Post was able to get it on, again, within like a month or two, I'm told, I'm not sure why we'd want to limit any of it. And I'd hate to also exclude inside Canada trips as well. I'd like to get an idea of what Canada is. If something where they can show us, well, this is what the costs in Canada are, nothing. Oh, great. If it's nothing, let's not bother. But I don't want to exclude it matter of hand. If it's like one trip from each, or even last couple of trips within Canada that shows it's normal numbers, oh, okay, they've got it fixed for Canada. But I'd hate to exclude internal travel until we know for sure what their cost controls are like. So I'm not proposing any changes to Ms. Vinola's or to what you've got. I just feel it's a bit overcomplicated.
Ms. McCauley, you're done?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Johns.
My concern about the domestic, like we're really focused, I think, on this international foreign travel. I think it's going to be really complicated if we ask for domestic travel, because we heard from the witnesses, they're stopping at air bases, they're using military, they're using some commercial domestic. It's going to be so erratic that we can't do good comparables. I don't believe. I think it's going to be, and I just don't want us wasting taxpayers' money pulling everything out from everywhere when it's not going to be something we can use. Like, I want to make sure we can use the foreign is going to be crystal clear. I want to make sure that we look at the last 3 governor generals, all their expenses, so that we can make a true evaluation of where the spending is. That's just my thought. But we did hear from witnesses that were clear that they use military bases. It's hard to quantify. That's what we heard.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we can certainly order paper the domestic stuff and see, and if it is crazy, then we can look into it more.
So I'm open to the conversation. I just want to throw in that we heard that. I want to get to the bottom of this as much as everybody else. I think the timeline getting documents, I think we have to be reasonable to make sure that we get the documents. I mean, we've been getting told things about numbers and then the next day learning they're different. So, I mean, I want to make sure we get the right numbers. So giving a reasonable time frame, but we want this, quickly as well, right? So So I support the what you're proposing. I think we all want to move forward with this. So.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Vignola.
Well, I've been listening to Mr. Macaulay, and I'm trying to think. Not easy all the time on a Thursday evening. I agree that we can ask for the list of all trips, including those in Canada. But for the time being, we only study those abroad. We can have it on the back burner that, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to warn you, we are going to haul them over the coals. If we discover there has been internal abuse, not just abroad, well, we are going to want to focus on what's happened potentially domestically as well. Now, as far as the years are concerned, you know, how do we, you know, if we go for 2014, 2015, 2017, how are we going to choose which years? Which is a good comparative year? Which is not? On what basis, on what characteristics will be opting for which year or another? You know, we said 2015 to 2022, that's 7 years. You're proposing 6 years in total. Is it really that much of a difference in terms of the quantity of documents? I wonder. And I'd prefer to have more than I need rather than less than I need. That's how I operate. Now, I understand we're talking about a lot of documents. I know that there are some documents in the archives that are gone over. Anything to do with the Governor-General is kept. We still have documents from time immemorial, the Lionheart years. But, you know, I understand that. But what is the process going to be for choosing which is the good year to examine? Which are the good trips to be looking at? Which are the right years? Which are the right trips? You know, that's where I'm kind of stuck. Now, I'm happy to delete domestic or for Canada, but in the same breath, I want you to know that we might come back to that at some point in time and want to go over that. So there you have it. I think I'll stop there. I think I've addressed everything. I want to get a handle on the process.
Mr. Housefather.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. First, all the amendments. Can the clerk please send us the amended motion, just so that we're agreeing on what we're approving on. Now, as far as the two-block period for each Governor-General, the motion goes back to 2015 to present. David Johnson was in that position until October 2017. So that's almost 2 years, 1 year and 3/4. Then Ms. Payette, 2017, left 2021. Then there was the pandemic. There was no travelling. So that was for more or less a 2-year period. And then Ms. Simons for the tail end. So I don't know if it's worthwhile divvying this up with blocks of times, given that during the pandemic, Ms. Payette didn't travel. She did renovate Rideau Hall, but that's another kettle of fish. Now, if you look at the website of the Secretary of the Governor-General's office, we see the amounts that are posted. We see the curb and with the fluctuation of expenditures. That's already publicly available. So we can ask for the background documentation, but quite clearly there is information available. but we'll have to go to Defence and Foreign Affairs for the rest of that information. But my point is specifically about these 2-year blocks. I think it should be from the 1st of January through today, regardless of how long each and every Governor-General held the position.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just listening to the translation. And before I go to Mr. Housefather, just reality. I mean, there is some. I mean, Mr. Paul Hoos has asked for a copy of the form as the amendments. So I'm just throwing this out there that you actually can adjourn this debate on this if you want to till you see that. But I will leave that. Just throw that out there, Mr. Housefather.
We're almost there.
Well, first of all, Mr. Chair, I mean, I was hoping that this amendment would be an amicable one because there's no, I mean, I've given it to the clerk. He can't, until it's translated, disseminate it. And I'm not going to be able to draft it and translate it in 5 minutes. So that's not plausible or possible right now. With respect to the comments, j'ai bien écouté les...
Well, I listened closely to my colleagues' comments. Now, Mr. Johnson was Governor-General for a long time. And perhaps the trips that he did in 2010 and 2011 are the most interesting ones. The Governor-Generals aren't associated necessarily with one government or another. Governor-Generals travelled not necessarily, and we're not necessarily going to look at successive years. It's not easy to get a list of the trips of each respective Governor-General, but what I don't understand is I think it's important to go back to January. It's not possible until by the 31st of October. The 31st of October, we can get the expenses for the trip in 2022, and we can determine as a committee what we want. But I would prefer 2-year blocks per Governor-General. I don't think it's unreasonable for us to say that, well, at some point we're going to want to look at Mr. Johnson's expenditures in 2011 and 2012 as opposed to 2015 and 26. Once we have seen the list of trips, we want that flexibility. Except when it comes to international trips. If my colleague wants it to be a domestic and international trip list, I have no issue with that. And as long as we are sure that the evidence is the evidence associated with the international trips for any given year.
Thank you, Mr. Housefather. Ms. Vignola.
Well, what would my colleagues say to this? Trying to get to a consensus here. I'd really, really like us to reach a consensus. The 31st of October is not tomorrow, but it's not far away. So what would my colleagues say to this? For the time being, we study the international trips. 31st of October, we'll have the documentation for the Middle East trip with a list of the trips that have been made since, well, Johnson was appointed when? In 2010? 2010? So with the list of trips from 2010. Okay, so the list of trips since 2010, and on the 15th, we'll have whatever witnesses we choose, if possible, of course. And then we'd look at those lists of trips and determine whether or not we want information about all the trips or which years we want the information for. Would that suit you? The only change here is we're not considering the domestic trips for the time being. That's the caveat, for the time being. I'm just looking to my neighbours to the right. See their reaction? Sorry, Mr. Chairperson. And what about Section 3 of your motion? that wouldn't be for late October, it would be for a later date. Once we've decided what years we're going to ask for information on. It's only Section 4, the trip lists and the 2022 trip expenditures. That's what we're asking for by the deadline of the 31st of October. So in October, we're only asking for the trip lists for each Governor-General as well as the expenditures for the 2022 trip. Yes, that's correct. And then the deadline would be the 15th of January, or the 25th of January, just to give folks a bit of breathing room for the other documents, to collect the other documents we require. Does that make sense?
Oui, non, peut-être.
Yes, no, perhaps. So,
Pour le 31.
By the deadline of the 31st of October, the expenditures for the trip to the Middle East, as well as the list of trips by David Johnson, Ms. Payette, and Ms. Simon. On the 15th, we meet with the witnesses. We determine what years we want documentation on and then in mid-January, about the 15th of January, we will get the documents for the trips and the years that we have requested. That's my take, my handle. Inaudible? Microphone, please, Mr. Housefather. Well, you might opt for more years than the 6 years at the end of the day. So that way we won't be sort of waiting forever on this information. If we say, I want the information for 2016, then it'll be the information for 2016.
On est enregistré.
We're being recorded here.
Gotcha.
Yes, we are being recorded here.
Okay.
Good. Can we move to vote?
So just before we go on, Mr.
Oui, c'est les mêmes.
Yeah. Just make that
Okay,
clear, though.
so clarification, are we talking the amendment or are we talking the motion? We're talking the amendment. Mr. Housefather.
As I understand it, and maybe I'm wrong, what Ms. Vignola just said is absolutely consistent with the amendment that I tabled, which is that on October 31st, we're to receive the documents related to the 2022 trip and a list of all of the travel of the current Governor General and the previous 2 Governor Generals. And then the committee will hear from the witnesses in November, and we will decide which years we will want to ask for all of the foreign travel expenses from, which, it could be 6 years or it could be more than 6 years, but that'll be up to the committee. So I think what she said is actually exactly what I tabled, and those documents, when we decide on the years, would be due in January.
Et on s'entend.
And we agree here that the documents for the Middle East trip are not blacked out. There is no blacking out of those documents. No. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr.
We're back on the 30th. You want to give it to the 30th? So we're not, or the 27th, the Friday before we're back? As opposed to the 15th? I don't care. I'm just wondering.
I will take the time to read. It will give me the time to read.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
So if we get...
Okay, I understand.
Sans les...
So
we're keeping it at the 15th, and that way you have time to...
I'd say the 25th, but if you prefer the 15th, the 15th is fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's what I'm asking.
Consensus is the 15th, correct? Nodding of heads? Yes. Nodding of heads, yes. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Paul Hoos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Now, I understand that my colleagues want to delve back into the past, but Governor-General Johnson was in his position for about a decade. So I think it's reasonable to start the study from 2014. That'd be a 3-year block during Mr. Johnson's tenure, then 3 years for Ms. Payette, and then the balance for the current Governor-General. Otherwise, we'll have to go back to Michael Jean and so on and so forth. So why not the 3 final years of Johnson? 2014 going forward to 2017, that's a 3-year block, just like we'd have a 3-year block, including COVID, for Ms. Payette. Otherwise, I understand your objective here, but you kind of have to be equal in terms of the tenures of each Governor-General. True, but if we have a list of the trips, we can choose which years we want information on. So where's the problem there? Well, it's just a question of fairness, says Mr. Paul Ouz. Why not take the 3-year time block for Mr. Johnson, given that Ms. Payette was there for 3 years?
Ms. Vignola.
Question logistique.
Logistics question for those who are going to be conducting the research. Perhaps it would be less difficult if those folks knew that we were going to ask for 2014 to 2022, whereas if we come back to our researchers later, it might complicate their task in looking up the archives. I'm not an archivist, I don't know, but I don't know. It's not a bad idea what's being suggested by our Conservative colleagues. It's not crazy what is being suggested. Perhaps that might be easiest for our researchers and analysts. I don't want them to get a headache over this.
Okay, so as I look around the room, I'm seeing a couple seconds. So I'm going to allow for people just to have a minute to discuss amongst yourselves. Yeah, thank you. And to get back, I will throw in just my little 2 cents with ultimately it's 10 years going back. The costs of things 10 years ago are not the same as the costs are today. Keeping that in mind.
C'est correct. It's fine. Oui, on est d'accord.
We agree. We agree.
In 2014 with Mr. Johnstone.
Okay, so we're starting with 2014 as opposed to going back to 2011. And that's to which Mr. Housefather's amendment is what we're changing that part.
Yeah, and so basically it would be the 2 previous Governor Generals with Mr. Johnstone only starting from fiscal year 2014.
Just to clarify, so the 2 previous Governor Generals and the activities of Mr. Johnston following 2014?
Only start. So it would be the current Governor General, Madame Payette, and Mr. Johnstone starting with January 2014.
January 2014. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to know if Mr. Housefather's doing this pro bono work, this legal work he did today, or is this billable, and who's he billing it to?
My Hockey Canada work was totally pro bono. This one, you're going to owe me a coffee.
Okay. With everything, there's no hands up. Everyone's I'm looking around the room and on virtual, and we're all in agreement with the amendment, correct? Okay. So now the amendment is any discussion on the motion as amended? And I'm hoping not to hear it. No? Okay, and all agreement in the motion as amended? Yes. Correct, carried. Okay, so thank you. Now, the next thing we'll go to is Mr. John's. So before we do, we can resume that consideration of that, or we can still leave it
next time.
Okay, we will leave that on the table.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
All right. So all right. Two other things just to follow up on. Number one, So as you may be aware on the issue of travel, ultimately for the travel we've talked about, the clerk is having to redraft the new agenda, so we will be getting that out to you so that we can resubmit that for future. It would be, we're talking winter, spring as to the time frame. Okay, the second thing is the work plan. At this point in time, we now have 5 studies, and I'm asking around the room to make certain that you are still comfortable with the chair and the clerk coordinating, recognizing, moving forward with the 2 studies, but adding in these other amendments as we see fit, recognizing also that we may have SUPs coming in that we'll have to fit in as well. You're comfortable with that? Is the nods around the room? I'm seeing yes. Great. Thank you very much. With that, I will declare the meeting adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving.